No sin yet, anywhere in the world, is prepared for the shocking changes that strike the human body the moment you cross the age of 7, because they do not arrive with pain, warnings, or obvious symptoms. They come like ghosts, silent, invisible, and undeniable. What scientists have uncovered over the last decade is so unsettling that aging researchers around the world are finally admitting a hard truth. Every human being goes through the same 5 biological shifts once they pass. It does not matter if you lived like an athlete, ate with monk-like discipline, avoided sugar and stress, meditated daily, took every supplement on the market, or felt younger than your age. None of that stops. What happens next? These 5 changes activate like hidden switches buried deep inside your body decades earlier. Switches you never knew existed until their consequences begin to surface. The most terrifying part is that your body does not alert you when these switches flip. Everything happens behind the scenes, quietly rewriting your health until one day something feels off and you realize the process started years ago. Doctors rarely talk about this because most seniors arrive in their offices long after the process is already underway. Families miss the early signs because they are nearly impossible to detect. And seniors themselves explain everything away as normal aging, when in reality, these 5 changes follow a precise biological sequence identified through thousands of scans and medical records, from adults across the United States, Europe, and Asia. One neurologist-led study found that the second change alone begins damaging the brain 3 to 4 years before a person notices even the slightest symptom, making it the most silent and most dangerous of them all. In this video, all 5 changes are revealed, and it is critical to stay until the end because the number 1 change controls how fast your entire body ages. Reference details are included in the description. Before going further, take a moment to share how old you are and where you are watching from, because every comment is read and replied to. Now we begin with the 5th change, because what truly happens at 75 is something most people never discover until it is too late, and you are about to learn it now. The 5th change is that your sleep architecture completely restructures itself. Once you reach 75, your brain literally rewrites the rules of how you sleep. This is not simply about needing less sleep or waking up earlier. It is a full architectural overhaul of your sleep cycles that affects every person who reaches this age. Research from the Sleep Research Society shows that after 75, the brain reduces deep sleep production by as much as 70%. That restorative stage, where the body repairs tissue, strengthens immunity, and locks in memories, becomes a rare luxury instead of a nightly guarantee. At the same time, the brain produces less melatonin naturally, dropping by roughly 15% each year after. This explains why you may find yourself wide awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, despite feeling completely exhausted. Even more fascinating is what happens to your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells you when to sleep and wake. It shifts forward by 2 to 3 hours, which is why eating dinner at 4 in the afternoon suddenly feels normal, and why you feel ready for bed, just as everyone else is settling in for their evening television. Scientists call this advanced sleep phase syndrome, and it occurs because the suprachiasmatic nucleus, your body's master clock, begins running on a different schedule due to changes in light sensitivity and hormone production. The real disruption is that sleep becomes highly fragmented, with the average 75-year-old waking 15 to 20 times each night, even if only a few of those awakenings are remembered. The key to coping with this change is working with the new rhythm instead of fighting it. Sleep specialists recommend going to bed when tired, even if that means 7 in the evening, and using early morning hours productively rather than lying in bed frustrated. Creating a true sleep sanctuary becomes essential, with room temperatures between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit being ideal, because temperature regulation during sleep also changes after light exposure becomes a powerful tool. Getting bright light, preferably sunlight, within 30 minutes of waking helps anchor the new circadian rhythm, while avoiding screens and bright lights after 6 in the evening helps stimulate what little melatonin production remains. Many seniors find success with a split sleep pattern that was common before the Industrial Revolution. Sleeping for 4 hours, waking for an hour or two of calm activity like reading or gentle stretching, then sleeping another 3 to 4 hours. The most important shift is accepting that 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep is no longer realistic and adapting routines accordingly. The stress of forcing old sleep habits only worsens fragmentation and contributes to chronic insomnia, which affects up to 60% of adults over sleep may be different, but different does not mean worse when expectations and habits align with the body's new blueprint. While sleep is changing, something even more dramatic is happening to your internal thermostat. The fourth change is that your body's temperature regulation system breaks down permanently. At 75, the ability to regulate heat does not simply weaken, it fundamentally fails, leaving you vulnerable to both heat and cold in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The hypothalamus, the small but critical region of the brain responsible for temperature control, loses about 20% of its thermosensitive neurons by this age. As a result, the body cannot detect temperature changes with the same accuracy. This explains why you may feel freezing when others are comfortable, or completely drained and dizzy on what seems like a mildly warm day. Sweat glands, the body's primary cooling mechanism, decrease in both number and efficiency by up to 40%, making it extremely difficult to cool down once overheated. This is why heat-related hospitalizations increase by 300% after age 75, according to public health data. At the same time, blood vessels lose their ability to constrict and dilate properly in response to temperature changes, a process known as vasomotor adaptation. This prevents the body from shifting blood flow efficiently to warm extremities or cool the core, the layer of subcutaneous fat beneath the skin, which acts as natural insulation, thins by roughly 30% after allowing cold to penetrate more deeply and explaining why winter chills feel so severe. Metabolic rate also drops by about 20%, meaning the body produces less internal heat when it needs it most. The most dangerous aspect is that warning signals fade. Older adults often do not feel thirsty, even when dehydrated, and may not shiver effectively when cold, removing to critical survival mechanisms. To manage this breakdown, experts recommend keeping living spaces between 68 and 74 degrees, even if it feels counterintuitive. Layered clothing becomes essential because perceived temperature can change multiple times a day due to blood pressure shifts, medications, and activity levels. Hydration becomes non-negotiable since water plays a key role in temperature regulation, yet thirst cues are unreliable. Setting reminders to drink water hourly and aiming for at least 48 ounces daily helps compensate. Using thermometers in different rooms provides objective feedback instead of relying on internal sensations. Programmable thermostats that adjust automatically throughout the day can also help match the body's changing needs. Exercise becomes a double-edged sword. Physical activity is necessary to maintain what remains of temperature regulation, but it must be done cautiously. Experts recommend indoor exercise whenever outdoor temperatures fall below 40 degrees or rise above. Creating stable microenvironments becomes critical, especially a perfectly climate-controlled bedroom, and carrying extra layers and water whenever leaving home, because the margin for error with temperature exposure becomes extremely small. Yet even these challenges are overshadowed by what is unfolding inside the digestive system. The third change is that digestion enters a state of permanent slowdown around the age of 7. The entire digestive tract shifts into what gastroenterologists call presbesophagus and clinical terms that simply mean every stage of digestion begins moving in slow motion. The esophagus loses up to half of its muscle coordination, turning swallowing from an automatic reflex into a conscious effort. That sensation of food sticking is not imagined. It is the result of muscles failing to fire in sequence. Saliva production drops by roughly 40%. And because saliva contains enzymes that initiate digestion, the process becomes more difficult from the very first bite. The stomach produces about 30% less acid, which may sound beneficial to those who struggled with heartburn. But this acid is essential for breaking down protein, absorbing vitamin B12, iron, and calcium, and destroying harmful bacteria. In the small intestine, the VIE responsible for nutrient absorption shrink by as much as 25%, leading to widespread malabsorption. The pancreas reduces its enzyme output by nearly 40%, which explains why familiar meals suddenly cause bloating and discomfort. The large intestine becomes especially problematic as transit time slows, allowing food to sit longer and leading to increased constipation, gas, and toxin reabsorption, which can affect energy, cognition, and immune function in ways most people never connect to. Digestion. B. How long it takes food to move through your system increases dramatically after stretching from a normal 30 to 40 hours to well over 100 hours in many older adults. This slowdown leads to chronic constipation that affects nearly 60% of people in this age group and contributes to fatigue, toxin reabsorption, and systemic inflammation. The liver, while remarkably resilient, is not spared. By age 75, it loses roughly 30% of its mass and blood flow, reducing its ability to process medications and nutrients efficiently. This is why medication dosages often need adjustment in older adults, even when nothing else has changed. The key is learning to work with this digestive slowdown rather than fighting it. Smaller, more frequent meals every 3 to 4 hours place less strain on a weakened system, with each meal ideally staying within 400 to 500 calories to avoid overwhelming reduced enzyme production. Chewing becomes critically important. Aiming for around 30 chews per bite helps mechanically break down food and compensates for reduced saliva and impaired chemical digestion. Digestive enzyme supplements taken with meals can help replace what the pancreas no longer produces adequately, and many people experience relief using broad-spectrum enzymes about 15 minutes before eating. Probiotic foods shift from being optional to essential. Fermented foods such as yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, and kimchi help preserve gut bacteria diversity, though they must be consumed daily because the aging gut environment makes it difficult for beneficial bacteria to establish long-term colonies. Fiber strategy also changes completely after. While fiber remains necessary for regular bowel movements, excessive amounts can overwhelm a slowed system. Experts recommend gradually increasing soluble fiber from foods like oatmeal, bananas, and sweet potatoes, while being cautious with large amounts of raw vegetables that are difficult for a weakened digestive tract to break down. Environmental changes are no longer optional. Throw rugs must be removed. Grab bars should be installed not only in bathrooms, but along hallways. Lighting must be improved, especially on stairs and in transitional spaces between rooms. Clear, obstacle-free pathways become essential. Footwear shifts from a fashion choice to medical equipment. Shoes need firm, non-slip soles, low heels no higher than 1 inch, and secure fastening, with many podiatrists recommending supportive shoes, even indoors. Timing also matters. Balance is usually best in late morning, after the body has warmed up, but before afternoon fatigue sets in, making this the safest window for more demanding activities. And with that, we arrive at the most critical change of all, the one that influences every other system in the body. The first change is catastrophic muscle loss. At around 75, the body enters what researchers call sarcopenia overdrive, a biological self-destruct sequence in which muscle mass declines at a rate of 3 to 5% per year. By age 80, as much as a quarter of remaining muscle can be gone. This is not about appearance. It is about losing the tissue that determines whether you can stand from a chair, climb stairs, or live independently. Researchers at the National Institute on Aging discovered that after the body begins breaking down its own muscle for fuel, even when calorie intake is adequate. This happens because of anabolic resistance, a condition in which muscle tissue stops responding normally to protein intake and exercise. Satellite cells, the muscle stem cells responsible for repair and growth, decline by about 70% after When muscle fibers are damaged through everyday activity, they simply do not rebuild effectively, leading to permanent losses that accumulate day after day. Fast twitch, tight. 2. Muscle fibers, which provide power and rapid response for movements like catching yourself during a stumble or standing up quickly, disappear at twice the rate of slow twitch fibers. This is why tasks that once seemed trivial, such as opening jars or rising from low chairs, become increasingly difficult. Motor units, the nerve and muscle connections that control movement, also die off rapidly. Each lost motor unit takes dozens of muscle fibers with it, and the body does not replace them. Hormonal changes make the situation worse. Testosterone drops to near undetectable levels in men. Growth hormone production falls by roughly 80%. IGF-1, a hormone critical for muscle building, becomes so low that muscles cannot receive the signal to grow even when exercise is performed. Inflammatory markers such as interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor increase by as much as 300%, creating a chronic catabolic state in which muscle is constantly being broken down faster than it can be rebuilt. Mitochondria within muscle cells, the structures responsible for producing energy, decline by about 50% in number and lose another 30% in efficiency. This leaves muscles with roughly 65% less usable energy, explaining the profound fatigue that follows minimal exertion. Protein synthesis slows by up to 60% after sex, meaning older adults require significantly more protein just to maintain existing muscle. Research shows people over 75 need at least 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, nearly double the recommendation for younger adults. The most alarming aspect is how quickly muscle loss accelerates during inactivity. Just 10 days of bed rest after 75 can cause muscle loss equivalent to 2 years of normal aging. And due to anabolic resistance, much of that loss is never recovered. Fighting this decline requires precision. Protein timing becomes critical, with evidence showing that 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal is needed to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Distributing protein evenly throughout the day is more effective than consuming most of it at dinner. Leucine, an amino acid found in eggs, chicken, and dairy, becomes especially important because it directly activates muscle-building pathways, with at least 3 grams needed per meal to overcome anabolic resistance. Vitamin D also plays a vital role. Deficiency affects roughly 75% of adults over 75 and directly contributes to muscle weakness and accelerated sarcopenia, while supplementation has been shown to improve muscle function by up to 20%. Exercise timing matters as well. Morning workouts tend to be more effective because cortisol levels are naturally higher and anabolic resistance is lower. Recovery periods must be extended, often requiring 72 hours between training the same muscle groups instead of 48, because reduced satellite cell activity and slower protein synthesis demand more time. Maintaining muscle after 75 requires eating and planning like an athlete, even when you do not feel like one. Protein immediately after waking helps counter overnight muscle breakdown. A protein-rich snack before bed reduces nocturnal loss, and going longer than 4 hours without protein during the day accelerates decline. Recognizing that this muscle loss is universal removes shame and frustration. This is not about weakness or lack of effort. If this information has changed how you see aging after subscribe now so you do not miss the next video on the specific exercises that can slow each of these changes by up to 40%. Turn on notifications so you are alerted when it goes live, because your future self will thank you for taking action today. Thanks for watching, and remember, aging may be mandatory, but suffering through it isn't.